doesn't need to be like right up your nose, dude.
That's not
That's
really
better.
comfy.
That's better. Okay, fine. 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 We can do it this. We can do it your way.
Okay.
We can do it your way.
This is being recorded, Derp. This is supposed to be a serious show. How's everyone going to take it seriously now? All right. So, Sunrise in Pineland. Welcome to the April 3rd, May 3rd episode. And we're going to call it Wading into Row. The topic of today's show. By the way, I'm your host, Tom Kaczynski. Welcome to it. This is a recurring multi-day per week morning show where we come on, talk about everything. We talk about politics, we talk about faith, we talk about living. We talk the Pineland concept, which is how we stop living in a world that is against how we want to live. And there's a lot in that for those who are new, for those who are continuing supporters. Want to thank you, especially those who pray for us to keep speaking, who send financial support to Venmo, CVC, PRV, PO Box 343, Eagle Lake, Maine 04739. Super chats. I've got like a dozen books. We'll have another one out later this week. Been doing some work on that, as well as audiobooks on Audible. And what else do I usually promote here? And of course, the Sons of Dust Ministry we do on Sundays. So today is going to be a more focused episode than I usually do. And it's going to be a hard episode because we're going to row into Wade. And by that, I mean Roe versus Wade. The report that leaked last night on Politico that we are going to be seeing the reversal of what has happened with abortion in America, where basically the decision will be remanded to the states. As I understand, the opinion was written by Justice Alito, and that will functionally lead to the end of abortion as a guaranteed right in the United States of America. There's a lot of pieces to unpack there, and this show, I'm not looking to do the quick political analysis of it always. What we're going to do is we're going to talk about a little bit about the origins of abortion. We're going to talk about why it has become so popular among certain people, what it says to a culture that doesn't appreciate life, and then the odd timing of why this is happening now. When this broke last night, my wife and I were talking around 9 p.m. because I saw it like literally 10 minutes after the story burst, just because, started getting pinged by people asking me to speak on it. And the timing of it is incredibly suspect, but we're going to use the second half of the show to get into that. And your questions may get answered there. I know a lot of people are going to wonder what this means. And to answer you very, very quickly, for those who have no patience, is this will exacerbate the cultural civil war terribly. And the reason why it does is what I want to get into in the beginning of the show. So if you hear occasional commentary, that's Dana saying hi. Say hi, Rita.
Hello.
Okay,
I
Dana.
have I have things and many words to say.
Dana has many words to
I
say.
have many good words.
And she will put them in the right order in a little bit later for each of us, God willing. If not, it'll be a more interesting show, but we'll save the schizo streams for later. And what would that be? We could have dyslexia
I don't
stream.
know. I inhaled enough like moldy hay yesterday that this could technically be considered a schizo stream because
Well, you know what? Maybe we should have a special feature for you. It'll be called Dyslexia Stream. It'll be like that scene in Robin Hood Men in Tights where the Sheriff of Rottingham, it just mixes and jumbles all the words, and we can let people here to try to puzzle out what the word
but
are,
that's
the
not what
sentence.
dyslexia means.
Isn't that where you
That's
mix up
reading.
yeah,
Where
well,
you're
I mean,
reading.
well, I don't know, what's the thing where you speak the wrong? See,
Aphasia.
no, that's where you struggle to speak. What would it be where you struggle to speak and put the words in the wrong order?
Brain damage. Lyme
Coming
disease.
soon, brain damage stream to you. Okay, so let's get into abortion, right? So abortion has been around forever. So has murder. Some people consider it infanticide. Some people consider it birth control. In the United States, since the passage of the Roe v. Wade decision, and I could be wrong on the year on this, but I think it's 1973, the Supreme Court has essentially treated this as a right in the country, and it has been a terrible a fight between the two sides since then. With, in fact, the woman who was involved with it, what's her name, Norma Jean Kelly or something, whatever her name is, she actually has rebuked it and gone on to say it was a terrible decision that she made. But in any case, I think the reason America is okay with abortion, and you look at the cultures that were okay with it, that legally allowed it, and look, it's going to happen. That's like saying that, the logic of the abortion lobby is a bit like this. It'd be like, well, since theft is going to happen anyway, we shouldn't put thieves in jail. That's the logic. Or like the other thing that drives me nuts about them is they'll say, like, we're here to defend women's lives, but we're here to murder babies. Like, I mean, just be honest about it, right? I mean, the point of it is the argument that was for it, that was compelling, that I think most Americans accepted, tacitly, who are not of a strong opinion about this, is the expediency of it. That A, women were going to do this anyway, and B, therefore, have it be done safely, quickly, and get it out of the way. A lot of women accepted that so they could erase some of their mistakes. A lot of men accepted that so they didn't have to pay child support. And a lot of people, I think, broadly just wanted it to go away. Conversely, though, what does it say when we are willing to offer up our infants to death because of the expediency of it? And I say infants because some of you who follow this issue, it's not something we talk about a lot on this channel because I try not to talk about domestic politics because all it ends up devolving into is an us versus them scenario. Is infanticide has been on the table. What was it? New York and Maryland, I think, both have laws where one state said that like after 7 days post birth you can have an abortion. So that's murder, just so you understand what that is. And I think one state had one law that they were proposing for 30 days after. And what I want to get into is why we have a culture that hates life, and specifically that hates human life. And it's very easy to look at abortion as a left right issue. And the way this is going to play out in the short term is as a left right issue, where the left is going to see their baby killers and the women and the right's going to be seen as women oppressors, and that huge distraction by which other issues will be run through with a dump truck, and which the culture civil war of rage season is going to start right after May Day. Because this was leaked. Let's be honest. There hasn't been anything of this import leaked in the modern era in the Supreme Court, and it was no accident that an hour later the activists were already out there. This was no accident. But let's go back before we go forward. What I want to say is that it's a culture of death. And for a very long time, America, which, on Sundays I preach it as Babylon, has had a culture of death. And why have we had a culture of death? We've reached the point where we don't value life. We don't look at our next generation as a sacred obligation to which we owe planning for our future. Look at the older generations today who are busy spending their, earnings so that their kids can't waste their inheritance because they're like, oh, I hate the little bastards anyway. And the reality is, if you hate them, then you ought to be looking in the mirror because you were responsible for how they came up. And, I spent a lot of time in the dissident right. Those of you know that movement. And that is the future of the right as much more than the conservative base that's out there now. And I will tell you that within the dissident right, it has been my observation that there are a great many people who have no problem with abortion. And they have no problem with abortion because they see it as the only means by which a demographic change can be forestalled because of the disproportionate numbers of minorities who have abortions. In other words, to put it bluntly, there are plenty of people on the alt right who are perfectly fine with abortion because they see more black babies being killed. That's the truth of it. Not going to mince words about that. And so when you have people who claim to have a moral instinct, who claim to have the desire to protect their people, and they exist in a multicultural environment, right? An environment where we are told different truths can coalesce, different people can be forced homogenized together, to the interest of no one, I would add. Then you get to the point where murdering the people who are not like you becomes perfectly acceptable in the minds of any. If you are an ethno-nationalist, and this is as true of people who are in Black Panther movement as it is for who are in certain elements of the alt-right. Murdering your enemy is the pathway to freedom. For people who are hardcore communist Bolsheviks, like the people we're going to see demonstrating today, or if you are an out and out eugenicist fascist, in worldly logic, the utopia you want, the perfect future, is justified by the murder of those who are against you, which is why wars happen, why purges happen, and ultimately the same reason why abortion happens. If you can kill your enemy before they're born, is it not to your benefit? And there are 100 different justifications I can give on every side of the spectrum and sides that most people wouldn't even consider. But what they all show you is that a love of the world, its different philosophies, and the peoples in it above the principles themselves leads to a culture where we affirm death. When we get caught into this idea of this group is right, this group is wrong. They have the right belief, they have the wrong belief. These are the chosen people, these are the forbidden people. Short of the Lord coming down himself like he did to Joshua and say, purge the Nephilim, basically, it's a really bad and dangerous place to go. And why do I say that? Where we are at this point and the danger in America is much larger than what we are seeing happen today, if this is legitimate, and there's problems, we'll get to those, with abortion, assuming this is going to be overturned. I should be celebrating this. I am vehemently pro life, being a Christian. I believe that the Lord has a purpose for every child. I believe that this will be. This is something that should never have happened. It is a horrible thing to which this country should have repented. And yet, as I said at the beginning of this, as my wife and I were talking, that the timing of it and the way in which this feels like a political maneuver where the value of life is being played and seen as a political chip on the board is both an indictment and condemnation of how corrupt and life denying this culture is, as well as a testament to the cynicism of the politics of this on all sides, whether this is designed to up Democratic turnout or create a new means for them to get mad, or, the division between states that's going to happen over this. And the cultural civil war, much like I predicted in the coming civil war, I told you the fight would happen over culture issues as a very probable vector that this could happen. And this may be it. But it's worth asking before we go into the details of that fight how we got to the point where we see infants as disposable. And you got to go back. It's funny the synchronicity in life. Sometimes things pop on your screen when you don't expect them to. And I saw a little clip from Aaron Russo. Wrote a or had a brilliant documentary back in the late '90s, early aughts, I think it was, called "America, Freedom to Fascism." This was back in my Ron Paul days, way back when. And the guy's most famous for the movie Trading Places. Some of you will have seen that. Dan Aykroyd, Eddie Murphy, really funny movie. Teach you a lot about the stock market. And he tells this story in this little clip I saw where he was talking with a Rockefeller about women's lib. And he said, well, I think it's good that women had a chance to do things on their own and whatnot. And the Rockefeller laughed at Aaron and he said this. He's like, you missed it. You didn't even understand what it was about. I'm paraphrasing here. But he said, the reason we supported women's lib was twofold. Number one, we wanted to be able to tax the other half of the population, which we couldn't do while women were busy being at home taking care of their families. The second reason that it happened is because we wanted to have the ability to indoctrinate your children from the very get-go. So instead of women raising the kids or being involved in the education of their children or having homeschools or religious or the church run things, you go back further, that now the state would run the kids. And the state ran them into secularism. Good morning, Sam. And they ran them into the idea that the ultimate God to which you should worship is the state, that religion or I should say that faith is a joke for fools, and the things we are allowed to fight over is, well, are you a Democrat? Are you a Republican? Are you left wing? Are you right wing? But that all of that, human life was secondary to the idea of our worship of the system, that our obligation was to the system, the patriotism to the system. And there were left wing elements of this, take care of the poor, welfare. And there were right wing elements of it, the warfare state, vigor for the country. But what there wasn't was goodness, and there wasn't consideration for the human people there wasn't consideration for life having intrinsic value, there wasn't depth. We became existential and we lost our essence. Okay, so we go forward, and what happens is, in that world where material is all that matters and status, we saw women and men surrender their family for their careers. We saw women and men come together saying, I am a good parent, I work hard, I make money for my kids, and if I have to work 60 hours a week so they can have a better future, it's better. And no one raised the kids except the TV or the internet or the mobile phone. In my day, it was still the TV because I was born in 1980.
You didn't ever have babysitters?
No, no, my mom didn't go
No?
anywhere. No, she didn't trust them. My mom made me look like not paranoid, and that's
Smart
it.
lady.
She had her moments. She tried her best. But in that world, what happened was the attack on marriage came forward because everyone had to be independent. And when everyone is independent, what happens is there's no resilience. Everyone is interdependent on the system. The state jumped in to fill in the gaps. The state was the daddy. The state was the husband. The state was the father. The state was the mother. The state. And this is a vision that's been 150 years or older, if you want to look at it, but just in a secular sense. We'll put it that way. I'm not going to go into the vision of, how, the demonic aspect of this, because it's there. But in that, abortion has always been a key element because it's the statement that says that life is not valuable compared to expediency and convenience for me. Okay? That and some people believe in abortion as an absolute right because they believe don't tell me what to do. You're libertarians, you're feminists, you're communists who believe, hey, I need utopia, as many people as I need to kill. And some people believe abortion is a limited right because of they either say, oh, because well, ethically, if something too bad was done to you, you can hurt someone else, or if I don't like this group of people, if they're too crippled, they're too whatever race, whatever belief, whatever that I'm just gonna to prevent the problem before it starts, and we're gonna remove them from the equation. And if we can induce the mothers to do so, great. And it happens because we live in a culture and a society where we think the state can accept all things, and the state fed us with supportive media multiculturalism, right? And in multiculturalism, you can believe whatever you want. Everyone lives together, everyone works together, and whatever problems exist to that can be removed, and we don't even question it. Abortion was an efficient way of removing problems. A lot of people tacitly said, okay, we're not going to fight this because, hey, a lot of poor kids we don't know what to do with will be gone rather than having to deal with them. Because the truth of it is, the reason abortion is illegal in America is because people don't give a shit about one another. And if you need more proof of it, consider how we treated the whole injection agenda, where now we are letting children who have no ability to have any decision for themselves be injected with something. And where's the pushback? We are all hiding in our holes, saying that, well, at least I'm not a part of it. Okay, you're not a part of it. But the whole world's collapsing around you. Evil rises when good men do nothing. And we've all done nothing for a very long time. And look, I fought the battles for years. And I know why, at this point, I even tell you why you have to do that. Pineland as a theory is about getting out of this crazy agenda. But I want you to understand that abortion is about a lot more than murdering the innocent. It's about that. There's no doubt about that. But it's also about a culture that hates life, a culture that hates its own future, a culture that says live for today and don't think about tomorrow's problems. It's nothing you can do about it. And I want to show you and demonstrate that that is the culture of death. We get excited about fighting wars, but not about raising our children. We get excited about buying money and toys. We don't get excited about being mothers and fathers. We get excited about leaving the house, but we get angry when we have to sit and build a home. If we were a healthy society when COVID hit, what would have happened is people would have been so excited to stay at home. There would have been a revolution where we would have said, hey, now we get to do things together. We can be around one another. And what did we do? We hated each other. We're like, let us out. I hate this person. This wasn't the deal I agreed to.
Aren't you so glad that you like me?
I am very used to being around my wife. I am happy to be around her 23 minutes to 58 hours a day. And the 2 minute hate here is something Orwell can be proud of. No, I'm just kidding. No, I'm kidding. It's a little joke.
Mm.
Mana, I know. No, I'm just kidding. Dana's pretty easy to be around. She's tough though, but she's fair. She tells you when she's tough. Anyway, y'all know my wife. I know. I know. A lot of the women in the audience love her color commentary. So she said she's so good at asking questions to make him get to the point. That's what y'all say, and I know it. That's okay. I'm married. I understand these things. I mean, it's fine. But I wanted to lead in with this because the culture of death is the root of the Civil War and the destruction of the West. We don't see ourselves as having a future. We negate our past, we ignore our future, and we elevate the vanity of our present. That is the debauchery. And children don't fit into that future because they're just a distraction or an abstraction. They take away from the pleasure we can have. And whether that pleasure is in our own personal life, which is why the left ultimately supports this sort of thing, or why, it takes away political enemies, which is why you see left and right wing elements support this thing. A lot of people have been willing to look the other way. And to be fair, a lot of Christians who are against abortion, which is a good position, could give two damns. I mean, the leftist critique that's been made for years that I remember is that, they care about the fetus until it's born and then they don't give a damn about it the rest of their life. And you know what?
I don't disagree with that.
There's a lot of people that's 100% true for it. The reason that criticism has worked because people have lived that way. Because we say, "Oh, I don't want to be guilty of murder, but I won't help you."
You know who you see taking care of the other poor people?
Mm.
Other poor people.
Yeah, other
We
poor
take
people.
care of each
It's
other.
true. It's absolutely true. And in the Bible, I will just tell you, Christ says, he says, "Did you feed me when I was hungry? Did you clothe me when I was cold? Were you there for me?" And we're not there for one another. Why? Because the people who were brought in here were nothing like us. And the people who went to school, who were homeschooled, versus the people who were schooled in the system are nothing like each other. And 1,000 different things. Pandemonium, the realm of demons, exists when everyone's shouting, "I want what I want. I what I want." Heaven is a kingdom. Hell is a democracy. And why do they say that? Because in heaven there's a natural order, there's a hierarchy, there's a truth, a righteousness at the heart of it. And while we may not agree on how to get there, we all agree on the destination. So we might argue from time to time about which trail to take. We might argue about which how to go back, but we're focused on that. But we had this sordid idea put in there. The truth itself is a fiction. That's what the scientific worldview is about. That's empiricism. That's technology. That's the lie that's been pulled over your eyes for 500 damn years. And abortion, the murder of our own young, which is, if you really want to understand it in the full occultic sense, is the worst form of occult child sacrifice where evil gets its power from, okay? You think the Lord, what's it say in the Bible? It would be better for you to have a millstone hung about your neck than to harm my little ones. That's what Christ said, okay? But this is the world. And so abortion. Abortion was made legal. Whole industries were built on it. I mean, whole medical industries exist on using those stem cell lines, fetal parts. Babies have been killed post birth because nobody wanted them. And it's not even that nobody wanted them. That's the myth. There were a ton of people who wanted them.
Yeah.
There were a ton of people who would take them. Oh, you're not qualified. So we had the state make the decision. And I just want to put this as clear as is that it would be better for a baby to die than to go to someone who the state didn't sanction. And none of us have a problem with that. This is the power we've given away. You want to know why your life is shitty? No offense, and I know I'm cursing, but I'm mad today. It's because you've given power to a system that's this broken. You have said the ends justify the means at every step of the way. Pineland says the opposite. The means explain the ends. And the means is you have to value life. Life has to be a blessing. And look, if you don't like certain groups of people, if you don't like how they live, you should be able to live separate from them. There's no question of that. That's the pathway to peace. Good fences make good neighbors. But to snuff them out before they're even started, you know? And, it goes into, there's a lot more. There's the culture of rampant sexuality, the culture of disposability, and all of these things. And you see these people who are going out there today that are so indoctrinated, that are so hateful. I mean, they're demonically motivated. There's no other way I can say it. Who are going to be, "You're attacking my womb." And this is the ugly part. This is the politics of it. You remember when Trump went around, how they mobilized women to like this idea? It's like when you're in a locker room and you're a kid and like some guy's waving his junk around. You know what I mean?
Oh, hey,
It's
the pink hats are coming back.
the pink hats are
The
coming
pink
back.
hats are coming back. The Pink Hat Brigade on Twitter was like, "Everybody, get your pink hats and dust them off,
And so what are they
ladies.
gonna do?
We're gonna need them again."
So what are they gonna do? They spent 4 years destroying Trump that way, okay? And look, Trump was controlled opposition, but just let's leave that aside for the moment. I'm not arguing any of that, but I just want to talk about how you use politics in certain ways. Now the Supreme Court is going to be attacked the same way. And I guarantee you, instead of doing debt forgiveness, which would remove debt for student loans or something, now the Democrats will be like, we need to go pack the court, which they tried to do during FDR. And I don't know if they'll be able to do it because if they do, Christian Cinema and Joe Manchin will get impeached, and the Republicans rightly would what would you say, would try to filibuster that to death. But I want to tell you a story before we go into that. I want to tell you the story of the Russian Revolution because it's relevant now. Russia's revolutions in 1917, there were two revolutions. It was the May Revolution and the October Revolution, okay? In the May Revolution, the Tsar was deposed and they had a democracy for a little while. Actually, the same thing happened in the French Revolution. They always promised democracy. And they had it for a little bit. The Mensheviks, which were the moderate socialists, ran the show. And there was a radical fringe called the Bolsheviks, okay? And they were scheduled to have an election in November where a reformer that was promising moderate reforms was likely to win. I don't know if it was who it was. It was Stolypin. I forget the names of it. It's been a while. The Bolsheviks, who were the radical leftists, held the cities. And in fact, if you really want to be honest, the Bolsheviks primarily, not exclusively, but the leadership of the Bolshevik class were not ethnic Russians, if you really want to know. A lot of them were people who had been absorbed in Russia's expansion into Poland and other areas that were of Ashkenazi extraction. You can look at their own races. They tell you this. I'm just going to tell you that. So when you see, like, if you look at our own Supreme Court, you look at the three people who are going to be opposing this. You have a woman who's Jewish, you have a woman who's black, and you have a woman who's Latina. Okay, the multiculti being used against it. I just want to demonstrate this is history. Draw your own conclusions. I'm just giving you facts. What ends up happening is they hold a coup. They don't want an election because they know they're going to lose the election. They know people don't want what they're selling and they think they're justified no matter what, but they need people to be angry. So there's problems with food, there's problems with whatever. Red October happens. The Soviets take over the city, turn the cops into military, and the right wing is laughing at this, and they're all fighting each other. The different czarist officers. Over time, heavy financing comes from Wall Street, amongst other places, London, and billions of dollars, the equivalent of, it wasn't billions back then, but the same purchasing power today, was funneled in to allow them to take over Moscow, and then as St. Petersburg became Leningrad. And the revolution consumed all. And many people died, and eventually Stalin consolidated power. And you know the history of Stalin and the millions of people he would kill just at random to keep people on their toes. You know, the dude killed 3 times as many people as Hitler. You don't hear a bit about him other than that. Well, you know, the leftist state, and you can go read it on Twitter, he did what had to be done. Okay. If what you think has to be done is to murder people to build your utopia, I have news for you. Whatever your belief, you're not going to reach utopia. I understand sometimes people go into exile. I understand sometimes people can't work together. But you know what? Sometimes you just got to pull yourself away from this. So back to America. Most people who are intelligent understand the last election was fixed. And I'll tell you the hint. It's not just that Trump lost, but every Republican incumbent in the Senate won, including some who suck, like Susie Collins. You want to know why no one questioned the steal? Because everyone got bought off.
Oh, they're lighting fire under her backside today up here over this Supreme Court thing.
She's terrible. She's a terrible person. I won't even go further than that. But she's not going to be of any hope to win. And it doesn't matter. So all these people are going to be angry. And they're going to see, we need to reset the court. Maybe they assassinated Justice. Maybe Clarence Thomas dies. Then they want to pack the court. Maybe they pass something through on the court. Maybe they go forward and they demand, we don't need this anymore. We need truth and justice and forget these elections that are fixed anyway. And maybe they get help. Maybe the Biden administration, seeing how unpopular they're going to be, and the deep state, knowing that the people hate them after a stolen election, where every indication is they'll go the other way. This is what happens in third world countries. This is what happens in banana republics, where there's no respect for the law, where it's arbitrarily enforced, where the FBI kneels for Antifa, but throws Christians in jail. Okay. Where our Mayorkas is calling white supremacy the biggest risk to the country, and where Jankowicz, when she's not busy singing about smoothies and that she wishes her life was relevant, is running the truth ministry. You're in a third world crackpot country. If you haven't looked, the roads are broken. We're one step from brownouts. Your dollar is fading, and we're still fighting wars all over the place to talk about how great our glory is. Las Malvinas son Argentinas.
They tricked us with the Banana Republic store. They made us think that it would be cool.
Maybe they did.
We were fooled.
10 out of 10. Savage. A minus. Anyway. So what will come? Violence and separation. I saw last night Kirsty Noem, Republican governor of South Dakota, says the minute this passes, we're going to ban this abortion in our state. And you know what states are going to ban it? Draw a line from North Dakota down to Texas and cross the L across there to the deep south. Those states will ban it. Other states will too, that are close to that think that way, and one or two here. And other states will make it legal.
Arizona's on the list.
Of what? States that will ban it?
Yeah.
Well, yeah, they probably will. And it probably will work because Catholics, Hispanics are Catholic, and they don't like this
North
either.
Carolina, South South Carolina were not on there. All the Deep South, Indiana, Illinois were not.
I'm surprised Indiana wasn't.
Pacific Northwest was not.
Of course,
Montana was not.
they got a Democrat governor up there.
I don't remember Idaho, but some of the
Utah will be. I mean,
some of the western states aren't gonna go. Well,
yeah.
I don't know if they are.
But here's what it does. It divides the country even more, and it puts us one step closer to the culture civil war. And I will say that this is something they seem to want. They seem to need. And the system wants you to think the problem isn't the system, but it's bad people or bad actors or bad ideology. But every move the system makes, whether it's a Democrat in power or Republican, whether you have Obama, whether you have Trump, whether you have Biden, whether you have whatever idiot comes next, do you notice how it keeps getting worse for us? It's been getting worse, honestly, since the Cold War ended. You know, it used to be before the Cold War ended, America had an ethos that said, at least we're not the godless communists. Russia fell, Soviet Union fell. And then all of a sudden, we became the godless communists. And just like Russia fell, you know, when the Soviet Union fell in 1991, people were being paid in vodka. I'm not even kidding. And all they could eat was a potato. You know, it's like having your drink and your food be one and the same. Um, and it could come to that here. Because then the country was able to be remade under new power systems, and new kleptocrats came forward. You know, a new oligarchy of the old KGB deep state ran the country. That's what Putin actually inherited. And a lot of that was being funneled off to the West, and some argue that he was a part of that system, some argue he wasn't. Whatever your own conclusions. But do you have any doubt that the people in Washington wouldn't mind getting rid of the farce of elections, especially when they know the people hate them? They saw the populist uprising in 2016, and if Trump was a bad representative, and nonetheless he crested on a very legitimate wave. And they've been trying to limit, control, and constrain us, and they've been putting all the rules in place, not just in America. We talk about this in the show all the time. We talk about Europe, where they're putting the Green Pass through. We're talking about Fauci and all these people who went around and said, well, we override you because we know what's best. These are the elites and the technocrats taking over, and they're going to say, we're going to take power, we have the right of law, and we are going to do this. And maybe what they'll do is they'll try to pass something in Congress that says abortion is legal. And they in theory, I guess they could try. I mean, the court is ruling that they've never made a decision, but are we going to have the point where we're literally going to fight over who we're allowed to kill and who we're not allowed to kill? Because once you start having fights over that, you know what's going to happen? Everyone's going to want to kill everyone else who doesn't agree with them. This is the spirit of madness that's over our land.
Lawlessness.
It is lawlessness. And look, I think it's in a vacuum and in reality, I'm glad this decision's being made, but the timing is terrible. And I hear rumors that Oberfeld's going to get reconsidered too, which is the one that makes gay marriage legal. Once again, I would celebrate if America was a country where marriage was between man and a woman, abortion was illegal, you know? And I know there's one against sodomy they're looking at too, that the government shouldn't be involved in this. And the court is an originalist court that's saying there's no American tradition to support this. You're making it up. If you want to pass a law, Congress, pass it. But don't do your dirty work of having the court make these things legal. Remember what I told you last week. Elon Musk said, if you want me to limit free speech on Twitter, you better have a law for that. 2 days later, the Ministry of Disinformation. You are seeing.
Oh, yeah, that's shady.
You are seeing the background of institutions making decisions that look like they're against the prevailing woke establishment. That's buying time for the establishment that seems to be crumbling. But you know what's happening at every back end of this? A new law, a new institution, a new government agency or intergovernmental agency in some cases, like the new World Health Organization Pandemic Treaty, is being put into place to say what you can and can't do. And some of these are global and some are national. But they're all working together to say you don't have the choice of how to live your life. Stop worrying about anyone else. Follow our laws. And that's the push we're going to see. And can they pull it off? I don't know. Probably not. But it may go to a fight. And I tell you another thing, too. If we get to the point now where this doesn't happen and the court doesn't reverse this, the right wing's going to be like, oh my God, they were intimidated and terrified into silence. And we will have the blood of these babies on the hands if we don't do it. So how does this end well? The truth is, the problem, like I explained to you, goes back decades. It goes back to a culture that hates life because it's a culture that hates itself, because we live in a world where we negate the very idea of truth. We don't believe there's a moral truth. We believe everything is relative. So we're a bunch of whores and prostitutes. That's why they call it the whore of Babylon. She'll sell herself for anything. She'll sell herself for a good time. But you know what? And take it from me. I was someone who lived that lifestyle plenty in my 20s. If you sell yourself for a good time, you know where you end up? In a ditch hating yourself. Alone where no one wants to be with you because you mean nothing. You stand for nothing. You believe in nothing. And you hate yourself. I look at all those people out there and I see a lot of people who hate themselves. But they find strength in numbers in group because they become the mob. And the mob is not a thinking unit, but it can be manipulated in certain ways. It can find its enemies and it can destroy them. And in destroying them, a chain reaction starts. And whether that chain reaction is because of social media silencing, whether it's because of the protection of the unborn, whether it's because we are seeing nations being maneuvered into war against one another, like we're seeing with the United States, Russia, China, all that. We have a world that's soaking itself in gasoline, getting ready to jump like Denethor onto the pyre. And that's where we're at. You like
Onto the
them?
pyre,
Yeah.
off the spire.
Yeah.
From onto
And
the
then he will
pyre to off the
expire
spire.
with
And
slick
then he'll
attire.
expire. That's terrible.
Yeah, I know, right? So what's the answer? As Michelle Terrian once said, needs solution.
What's the solution?
We'll find solution. You got to come out of her. You got to come out of this world.
The solution is Jesus, but nobody wants Jesus. Except a few select few of us, left over.
The Lord offered a way to truth that no one has ever tried. Love God above all else, which is to say, love truth. And truth has justice and mercy in it. It's not hatred of people. It's hatred of bad things we do that destroy us. I'm gonna give a hot sermon on Sunday about that because now's the time to do it. It's fine. If we don't blow up between now and then, I'll do it. It's fine. I'm ready to do it. And all of us will walk away from it thinking we're all going to hell. But you know what? At least fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. That's fine. But it's about truth and it's about love for one another. And we cannot love one another in this country because this country is the realization, the dialectic of Hegel. It is the perpetual war against itself. It is the Maoist story of revolution against one against other to give control. It is the story of the Garden of Eden acted over and over again, where we choose from the tree of good and evil, knowing that our brains can't even handle the concepts. And the serpent there keeps on slithering along, playing snake jazz while we go along to the hits. It's a sick beat. That's from Rick and Morty. If y'all don't know, it's fine. It's a little inside joke. You gotta follow the pop culture. It's tricky. Um, so what comes next? Will our summer of riots commence? It's May. It's riot season in the United States, so that's cool.
I don't got it in me for how many years now? Since 2016, 2015, 2006. Yeah. 6 years of this stuff every single year. For all summer. When it starts to get warm to when it starts to snow. This country has been in let's burn everything down pandemonium for 6 years.
So
I'm over it.
let's be a little more I mean, I don't blame you, but let's be a little tactical about it. So the leftists are going to burn down their own cities because the rural areas won't let them do it. And what'll happen eventually is that they'll ask their sort of totalitarian mayors in wait, people like Wu in Boston and what's his name, Adams in New York. They'll be like, we want support from our government. And you know what will happen? They'll start organizing those governments. And they'll start organizing, not against the rioters, but they'll start organizing intergovernmental authorities, state government, police governments, um, money in these very wealthy areas to build their own mercenary armies. Say, we will enforce our laws. You will be permitted to get an abortion or you will be beaten. The Soviets did this in Russia. I think I remember reading the New York Police Department actually, after the FBI is like the second largest police department in the world, second largest law enforcement agency. So you've purged everyone who has a conscience and disagrees over the jabs. Now you're going to have the people there running the joint who are going to be given authority to be more authoritarian. Because, like they say, we support democracy, but look at Ukraine. Okay? Zelensky banned all political parties against him, throws dissidents in jail, locks down the borders, can't leave. Our hero, our great man, you know? They're going to do the same, and they're going to call it democracy just because we already know they don't care what words mean. It's just whatever utility, whatever throws another thing, another log on the fire. And they're going to organize. And the rest of us, these laws are held up, we'll think, hey, America's going to protect us. America's not going to protect you. You saw that. The deep state is all against you, and they will continue to be. But what they will do is they'll say, maybe we'll take direct control. Maybe we'll take direct authority. And whether it happens under Biden or not, that's one way it could go. I know the optimists out there will be like, hey, this is the Q moment. We're going to see the whole thing turned around. Okay. Let's pretend it even happened that way. Let's say that the rioters go after the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court gets mad enough where the majority says, enough of this. It's bad enough. We looked the other way when you stole the election. Now you're sticking your heart on us. We're going to look at what happened with Trump and we're putting him back. Okay. Let's pretend that happens. I mean, we're living in fantasy land where anything's possible. So let's pretend. Then they come forward, they purge the deep state, they take over. Then you're going to have civil war where you're rioting against all the cities. Like, oh, it's fine. They're going to riot. We'll starve them of food. They'll die. It'll be a better future. And that's what the Civil War would be if the right was fighting it and they were trying to win it. I wrote it. I understand it. But whose benefit is that to? You know? I mean, if that's where we've gotten to the point where we have to contemplate to be happy, whatever side you're on, the purge of 150 million people plus. And then the rest of the world's gonna be like, okay, everyone's counting on us for gas, everyone's counting on us for food. The whole world begins falling. It's madness, it's chaos. New world order. Order ab chaos, right? Order out of chaos. And all these chaoses are going to pull America down and America out. Because even if you had your right wing leader, Trump, what's he support? What's he stand for, Other than his own veniality. Global homo, exactly. He was out there.
Never did a thing for the church.
No, and Christians made bad deals. I mean, it's... You have to put your foundation first. When the Puritans came over here, I used to talk about this a lot. I don't talk about it now too much, but it's still very relevant, especially today. They came over here, and the first thing they did was make a covenant with God. They asked to exist for 400 years, actually, because that's how long biblical covenants are, saying that they would honor his ways, that they would build a society that was designed to be pleasing. And look, you could say they went too far. That's fine. We could get into argument of the merits of it, but at least they had the right intent. And what destroyed their good and just society was the creation of the United States of America. No religion shall be established. Absent the state religion, people did whatever they wanted. With separation of church and state, I believe whatever I want. I do whatever I want. Who are you to tell me what to do? In a society like that, how are we supposed to care for one another? And look, I'm as hate-filled as anyone else. I'm not above understanding why we look at other people and be like, if we don't destroy them, they will destroy us. But let me give you a crazier idea. When we destroy them, we destroy ourselves. That's what Christ taught. And people didn't understand him then. They don't understand him now. And look, it is a struggle to understand this idea. But the same Christians who are today celebrating that this is going to happen, who are going to look idly by with the destruction of the people who are so far lost, do you think the Lord celebrates the lost souls that are out there? And I get that there are people you can't save, and I get you reach a point where there's nothing you can do. But do you want to be a party to the destruction of all these things that are so wicked and evil? The idea is absolutely.
There was a prophecy that I read out off of 444. I don't know if it was last year, but it within the past 1 or 2 years.
Mm-hmm.
And they were talking about every single baby that's aborted, an angel carries the child to God, and God wipes the tears away, kisses the child, and then sends it off to be taken care of. But each child that's aborted is brought to their father by an angel.
Amen. Well, I hope that prophecy is true. It's a beautiful one, and it fits the nature of the Lord. But I want to live in a society where we help one another. I want to live in a society where we face truth and where this is not something we have to deal with. And maybe this is just something that will have to be dealt with. And if it is, better it were dealt with completely. And I do understand there are people beyond reaching, but I'm not going to celebrate it. I'm not going to be happy about it. And I'm not going to stop wondering if we're not just being set up to all take down one another like we've been expecting for years in America so that the rest of the world can do what it wants to do. Because the enemy's always been within. And I don't imagine any scenario where America will become a good place, where people who would treat me better win or people who treat me worse. And that's why I'm a Pinelander. I want out of this. I want off this crazy train. I would rather live with 100 good people who understood truth. And you know what? You have the right of exclusion. We haven't had that in a long time. And that's at the root of this. We weren't allowed to say who's allowed to be brought in, we weren't allowed to discriminate. We should have said ideas were bad. We should have told the sodomites, go back home. You can't control every sordid thing people are going to do, but you know what? You can't celebrate it. Like these gay pride parades. They were just in a disgusting flesh parade, a celebration of the worst kind of debauchery being put on children where we objectify and fetishize everything and everyone. This is idolatry. Fetishism is idolatry. It's worship of an object. And you know what objects are? They're death. Worship of objects is death because it's sin. You're literally giving your love, your praise, your worth to something that's not alive. The symbol of a thing, you know? That's why Satan got tossed from heaven. Like Lucifer got tossed. He was the shroud. And he thought they were worshiping him. When you're worshiping gold or silver, you're worshiping the shroud of the temples that existed back in ancient days. That's what you're doing. When you worship lust, you're worshiping the body of it, but not the substance. And what we need is, people say we do need a revival. We need a new great awakening. We do. We need an awakening. We need people to have alarm clocks going off in their brains because what's broken, our system, as broken as it is a reflection of how broken we are on the inside, how far we are removed from God and earth, our Father and the land that sustains us. We don't even bother to look anymore. And when we had time off to think about it, so many people ran screaming back because they didn't want to hear that voice, that still small voice that offered a pathway out of it. And such it was always meant to be. This is prophecy, isn't it? But the elect, I am persuaded more than ever that here in Pineland, those of us who chose in this order faith, folk, and family, that is, we worship the Lord, we follow his rules, that we find our family and our faith amongst the people who are like us, who believe as we do, who are willing to come out of Babylon, and in the families that we will then defend, where our big greatest thing we celebrate after our Lord is our children. We don't do that. And we don't have a life that affirms that. We don't have a system that's going to do that. And whichever side wins, that's always going to be the case because money's going to run the rule. Money. I mean, Babylon, Assyria, Samaria, all these things basically worship two things. They worship sex and they worshiped money. We're no different. We only have become more efficient at doing so. And so the women on the left are going to make it, oh, it's like, he can't tell me what to do. He can't tell me what to do. How many families were broken by that terrible logic? And you know what? It's funny. I mean, I'll be honest. Look, I'm close enough to the culture war I can laugh at it. I watch a bunch of left wing women saying, I'm going to withhold sex. Incels. And men hate women. Women were abandoned by men because men believed in equality, because they believed in the wrong system. And now women are awful and men are useless in too many cases, not always. And we don't know how to relate to one another because we're not families. Men and women were meant to be complementary units. But we can't think bigger than ourselves because we've been taught every step of the way. And it's not, and the thing about families and connections is you don't teach these, you live these things. But we don't live them anymore because the state got in between us. Because money encouraged that. Because the church got weakened and the church wanted to be loved of the world. And you have money and you have prosperity gospel and you have all these things. One always says I poke fun at the Catholics all the time, and I do. Your message should come from Jesus. He's your intercessor, not some funny Argentinian in a hat. But the prosperity gospel of Joe Osteen is just as cynical.
The gospel.
It's terrible. I know. Anyway, I do struggle with speaking these days, and I don't care. I'm going to keep speaking. I just have to get over it. I'm good at getting over things. It annoys me. Um, so what now? What next? Well, I wonder if there will be consequences for what happened, this leak. I wonder how violent it will get if this is pushed through. I wonder what we will see in terms of violence and uprisings.
I
It
don't
seems
understand how a leak like that happens. That's why I don't. That's why I'm not like completely buying into this yet, because that sort of thing just doesn't happen.
Well, the thought that's being circulated is that one of the legal aides to one of the three liberal justices, Sotomayor, what's the new lady, Jackson or something, or what's her name, Kagan, may have done so. Because I mean, these people. I mean, look, and their whole logic has always been political. These were political appointees. You can look at their long background, especially Kagan. Um, I mean, okay. I guess it doesn't matter. What you may see is a push at some point. If you take a coup, which is what our government did, at some point you have to legitimate your government by removing your enemies. The pieces have been put in place to realize that, nationally and internationally. If you time this with a war with Russia, where you can use, acts saying, calling it treason, where you're not fighting for this side. Because remember, the same people Zelensky was supporting. I mean, the dude was literally a gay dancer of Jewish extraction who's probably Soros related. This is all related. And remember, the reason why none of these crimes were prosecuted when these people were burning down the cities was because Soros was paying to buy the DAs. Best justice you can buy. And this happened in late Rome, by the way. This is not new. People are like, oh, democracy never goes through. Democracy always goes through this. It happened in Athens. It happened in Rome. If it happened to me, it can happen to you. J Rock got it right. Not going to give you the context of that. Um, it's the truth. That is what we are seeing, and this has happened many times throughout history. So, what happens after that is, well, we'll have war. There might be a nationalist regime that comes forward with a military junta, which is why Obama purged them in advance. Maybe there'll be a civilian uprising. I don't know. It's possible. Maybe we see division because what we're going to see is the next step. I will tell you the next month, a bunch of right wing governments, if this actually is enshrined as the law of the land, abortion will be made illegal throughout Dixie and parts of the heartland. It will be a it will be enshrined in law as a protection in blue states, which will be primarily New England, most of the Mid Atlantic, even though there'll be a lot of pushback in Appalachia, as well as the Pacific Coast, and the purple states will get really ugly over it. And the idea is to turn out more people. But even if you turn out more people, given the way the map's drawn out, it's still going to help the right if you did that. If it even comes to election, so they'll say, well, we need electoral college reform. And in truth, there's an argument to be made for that, that, it was designed, the idea that we have 435 seats in Congress is a function of law in 1920s, not a fast and required thing of the Constitution. But you know, the left in governance has never been shy about passing bills. They're going to have to do a lot fast, and maybe they will. Or maybe they'll have a crisis and then they'll have martial law, like they did with COVID, to go after all the businesses and the wealth and the ability to resist. Or maybe what we'll see is, something like DeSantis in Texas and some of these other states, maybe we'll see, maybe the South will rise again and say, you know what, we are here standing for life, liberty, and whatever. And then that's the war. I don't know. Could happen. Or it could just be low level violence that continues the long degradation where nothing in America works and we slide into impoverishment as the dollar destroys us all. And if the dollar's gone, then what are we ready for? The new central bank digital currency, the passport system. You will own nothing and you will love it, as Klaus says to us all. Old Santa Claus to beat you with coal. In fact, he can't even beat you with coal. He'll have to beat you with mung protein. I was in the
Mung
gas
protein.
station. I
I
was in a
like
gas
mung
station.
beans are good. Have you ever had them?
Well, a story. So I was in a gas station the other day, and they are always trying to put forward these ideas of the plant substitutes. So they have Beyond Beef jerky. Beyond Beef. I just want beef jerky, but that's fine. So the primary ingredient is mung bean protein and soy protein, and it costs just as much as the other, even though basically we're having expired plants. Because hey, you got to make your profit, right? So that's why mung beans were on my mind because I looked at that because I'm always curious what's in these things.
Like
What's
I
out
saw,
there.
I was looking up some chicken foraging grasses and seeds that you can use. where if you free range your chickens, to just like keep throwing out there in the grass to give them something to
It's a
graze
good
on.
idea. Yeah, we had a much happier show. If you need to be cheered up, go listen to the last 30 minutes of yesterday's show. Um, and by the way, if you like the content, you like the intensity, you like the fact that this is just honest programming, and you don't have to agree with me, but I'm going to tell you where I stand. I'm not here to lie to you. I'm here to tell you what I think and to give you good analysis.
And it would be a disservice to not tell you the truth. Because
And look,
we
sometimes the
truly do
truth is hard.
care. We care.
Sometimes the truth is hard. Sometimes you're in a position where I'm looking at these people who hate me, who are my enemy, who would say they're my enemy, and I look at them and I think, my lord, it's sad how far you are hidden astray, and that as tempting as it is to go and want to punch them,
What's
because
the
I get
Bible
it.
say? Better are wounds from a friend than kisses from an enemy.
Yeah, it's a good
So,
word.
and we're supposed to keep each other accountable and, iron sharpens iron and all that. And,
What I worry about, though, and this is something we talk about a lot, Dana and I talk about this even more than you hear on the channel, but we told this a lot. The ready made solution to the problem you hate. So many times we get trapped in that. Think after 9/11, the Department of Homeland Security, we need the Patriot Act. Who's going to stand against the Patriot Act? Well, me. I'm not a patriot. I hate this country. I can tell you why it's been a bad idea from the get go. I don't hate our people. I don't hate certain ideas, but this whole thing has been a Masonic project from the get go. And you're like, oh, he's a bunch of cult stuff. Yeah, because they do that.
because it's true. It's
But
100% true.
but I'll tell you the other thing. Most people are too stupid and too willfully involved in the world to understand. The system is the way it is because it allows dumb people to do easy things and makes them feel good about it. It's a winning strategy for everything except long term survival. And it's a manipulation. So at the end of the day, you're fighting a horde that's being manipulated by a bunch of evil sociopaths. And you're just asking, how can the good people survive this? And the answer is, do you fight them over the idiots that will be turned against you? That's what politics is. And I made that mistake for 30 some years. Or do you find the good people and let it crash on its own and say, Lord, protect us, preserve us. Please bless Pineland as we hide here in the woods. And you build your own future.
What was your biggest personal political mistake ever?
Oh,
Did you vote for someone that you shouldn't have, or I'll tell you mine. I will tell you mine if you tell me yours.
You know what?
What mine is.
I know what yours is. I don't want to. I will answer you, but I will answer you on a future program. I have to think about that. That's not an easy question for me because I've done a lot. My biggest political mistake.
Yeah.
You know what? Let's leave that out there in the comments section as we go through afterwards. If you want, why don't you talk about what yours is? And in a forthcoming broadcast, maybe tomorrow, maybe before the end of the week, we'll get to it. Dana asked a tough question. And
Has anyone ever made like a really stupid political boo?
I mean, I voted for people I didn't like. I at first I went back and forth on the Iraq War, but I mean, the thing is, so I went to a really fancy college. I am very well educated, extremely self-educated. It took me probably just as long to deprogram from the things I was taught were true, which I learned were false through experience and through simple logic, as it did for me to learn those things in the first place. And that's perhaps one of the values of this channel. You've been deprived your history, so you don't understand context. You've been presented ideology in place of facts and actual narrative that would be useful. So it's very hard to put that, and in your whole lifestyle, if you think about it, you're always made to pay for like our whole system. If you really want to simplify it, I talk about this a little bit, but not directly and come out of Babylon, is you don't get a thing, you get a thing to get a thing. For instance, you don't make your own food or grow your own food, you get money to do it. So you're always getting a surrogate thing. There's always a middleman. And what the system does is it convinces you there's a middleman. It convinces you that you need, a banker to get your cash, or that you need a priest to bring you to God. And while these people can help you, and while there are good examples of it and bad examples of it, the thing is, it's always you that has to make the jump. It's always a personal journey. And once you make those jumps, you begin to understand your own efficiency, and you begin having meaningful connections with other people where it's not based on transactional utility, but on the fact that there's genuine bonds of affection. For instance, like if my wife and I made our relationship about our relative poverty, we would be miserable, but we don't make it about that. We make it about the Lord, which is why we meant to be poor and happy, which confuses people. because our value is not expressed by the worldly substances we have, or even the influence in the world, save by it's the fact that we believe in a certain set of values and we try to live honestly to them. And if we reach one person, it's a blessing, and if we reach 100 people, it's a blessing. And the Lord gives us the work He gives us, and we approach our day each day with that sort of mindset when we can. Do we struggle with that? Of course we do. The world intrudes upon our thinking, and the world makes us hate others because we have a hard time doing what Christ says. We have a hard time forgiving and forgetting because we know the awful things they do. And yet you think of what Christ said when He found the one who sinned. He said, "Go forth and sin no more," after everyone wanted to stone her. And this is the Christian walk. The Christian walk is you hate the sin. You don't endorse the sin. And ultimately, as it says in Paul, you learn to separate yourself from the sin. You walk away, you have to do these things. But the problem is the state keeps us all connected with each other as prisoners in these countries where we're not allowed to walk away from one another. We're not allowed to be apart. And America, when it was good, was because groups of people went to the frontier and live apart, like the Amish still do today, and other groups. There are examples, of how that life has to be lived. And that's what we need now, because ultimately they're not going to be able to provide food for us. The one thing I will say is any more civil chaos, especially if there's rioting in cities, I mean, goods and services aren't going to go there. When people are hungry and they can't be fed, that's when revolutions happen. That's when, you look at the example of it. I showed you the Russian Revolution was in May, the French Revolution, July 14th, Bastille Day. In summer, people's tempers run hot. And this year, when we're having artificially induced famine, when we're having espionage going between countries, not just in the United States, as we saw more, I think a plant in Fresno went up, as we're seeing the destruction of our food supply deliberately. And we're seeing that happen as espionage between countries. There's going to be so many angry people, and we're going to have a world on fire. That's what we're going to
Friends
have.
aren't gonna want to go to the cities when they're being burnt down.
No, and not only that, but I was reading how much they're going to be hurt by A, the rise in diesel prices, and B, the Chinese shutdown of the ports. So America is being set up to burn, and why now? And people could say, "Oh, it's just bad timing." Maybe, or maybe it's the Lord's timing. It's funny. You could say, and maybe I even would say, is the Lord. We were reading about the life of King Hezekiah on Sunday, and his son Manasseh was absolutely terrible. But he was followed after a very short reign by some other king whose name skips my mind, by Josiah, who was one of the most godly kings of Judah. And the Lord restrained the consequences of the awful sins, the just raw idolatry, human sacrifice. It was really bad. I mean, ancient Judah had a lot of problems. Sometimes they went back and forth. They were schizo, much like America, where one moment we were virtuous and one moment we were completely vice-ridden. At least as we saw, not that the virtuous were ever that virtuous, because they always wanted signs and proof, and they were literally taking joy in their own virtue rather than just doing it. But anyway, so Josiah is in there, and he's king. And what ends up happening is that eventually a war he shouldn't have gotten into leads to the destruction of Judah. Literally, Egypt was going to go attack Assyria, and Josiah intervened because he didn't want them crossing through Judah, and he got destroyed by the Egyptians. And then Israel fell, Judah, I should say, fell, and the Babylonian captivity went forward, where you see, the example. Because Jeremiah warned him that would happen. He was the prophet then, and eventually Daniel comes out through that time, and he starts telling the story of Christ and being in the lion's den, the fire, all that stories from the Bible. But the reason I share that story here is because what happens is when you have an evil ruler or evil rulers, in time, what the Bible teaches is God will bring his punishment down and help you understand. So, at the time that we're seeing abortion being uplifted, which is something we would celebrate, that still doesn't expiate the blood of all the dead that's on our hands. A nation should cry out for repentance. A nation should cry out and say, "Please, Lord, forgive us our terrible sins." And the Lord is all merciful, but his anger is true, the justice of the blood that calls out. I mean, you can even see it if you look in the Bible. Go back to Genesis, going back Abel calling for the blood against Cain, for the justice of God that cannot be denied. Because God is true and God is just. And so America has to suffer these consequences, and that we fight civil wars, even if things are reset to where they should be. It does not forgive us the years and years of blood on our hands. Only the Lord can do that, and he'll only do that if we are seeking repentance. But we won't, because you know what? We will be at war against ourselves, because we as a people do not believe in goodness and righteousness. There are people who do, and there are people who will have to make a choice. I mean, I'm speaking to the good people out there. And look, if you've been wrong on these issues, the redemption is a personal thing. The Lord may choose to forgive you, and I'm not, and your sin is not greater than Jesus's goodness. That's why I told the story of Manasseh and all the terrible things he did, and he actually sought the help of the Lord and got it. But we got to walk away. And when we walk away, we got to walk to a culture of life. Because I'm telling you, the left is absolutely mad about destroying everything around them. They have the doctrine of pure demonality of destruction. But I'm going to tell you, the virtuousness the right presents as a good is a worldly, secular, greedy good. We are literally seeing lust battle money. If you really want to know, we are watching Mammon fight against what's the name, the lust goddess.
Aphrodite.
No, well, yeah, in
Jezebel.
Greek, yeah, that's a better way of putting it. We're literally watching Mammon fight Jezebel. That's what the right versus left is in America. Maybe you like one more than the other. If you're right wing, you probably like Mammon because you like the idea you made it on your own, and your sin is probably pride. I did it all on my own. Okay, no, you didn't. There was a whole bunch of things before. Not to say you didn't work hard, but humility is a good value. It's a godly value. Or lust, I'll do what I want. I want to enjoy things. I'm just like, okay, the world's meant to be enjoyed, but you're not supposed to live in carnality, lust, and sin, where all you're doing is going with your feelings and your pleasures. And this is what it is. It's mindlessness of feeling versus mindlessness of self-aggrandizement. And all of these things, if you look at these values, none of them are good. And this is what we do. We fight wars of the lesser of two evils over and over again until we destroy everything. And that's what the people on top want because they want to control you. And then they'll have a solution for you, and you'll be so worn out, you'll take it or you won't fight it. Some of us still have a little fight in us, a few of us. And the fight we have to have now is just to get out of the way. I wouldn't say